Hey everyone, I'm Dan,
I'm Matt.
and together we're better. Beeping Edge Tech Reviews. All right, so yeah, I kind of slammed that one a little backwards there, but okay. So, all right, what we're going to cover today is going to be installing Ubuntu Linux on a PC. And this is going to be an older PC. It's not got very great specs. It's a low-end dual-core processor, 4 gigs of RAM, and a terabyte hard drive, and it's a few years old. But that's the point. That's kind of why we're taking it to Ubuntu. All right. So there's a few things coming up with Windows. All right, and then I'll let Matt talk about what's happening with Windows 10. Okay,
Mm,
so
Yeah, so what's going to be happening with Windows 10 in the next few years is, initially when it was released, the plan was for Windows 10 to be this kind of like the last OS, so to speak, from Microsoft. The plan was for, excuse me, the plan was for the OS to continually be updated, for updates to be pushed kind of in perpetuity for years going forward. And obviously, with the release of Windows 11, you can see how that plan went. Um, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the come 2025, I believe, is when they're going to be ending live support for Windows 10 systems.
October.
October
Okay.
2025?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. At which point you can still continue to use Windows 10. It's not like, it shuts off and like, oh, you better go buy a new OS or new computer or something. But you won't be receiving updates for it anymore. And so it will be in a totally finished state, which can long term it presents certain, among other things, certain security, risks. If you got important things on your computer and you have an OS that hasn't been patched in a year or two, or whatever the case may be, after uh, service ends for it, then that's a vulnerability and that's a risk you probably don't want to take.
All right. So to put it in a little bit different terms, all right, it's a lot easier to shoot a sitting target than it is one that's moving, right? Right now, Windows 10 is getting update after update, security patches all the time. It makes it harder for hackers to get in and break into it and do bad things to it. All right. For instance, for example, Windows XP has been out of service life for what, 10, 15 years, maybe
A
even.
while now,
Yeah,
yeah.
something along a long time, right? So there haven't been any security updates to XP in forever, and that means that people have had like a decade plus to, probably closer to 2 decades might be. I don't know. It's been a long time.
And in
And,
fact, with just as a to add on to that, with Windows XP, I believe with Service Pack 2 even, but with Windows XP, there are a lot of known like security exploits that are out there at this point. These are known vulnerabilities. These are known kind of weaknesses in the code itself of Windows XP, and people who are malicious actors, people who would want to, get into your computer and steal your information, if they were so inclined, if you're running Windows XP and they're so inclined, they can do so, and they can use some very well-known, vulnerabilities in the OS's code. And it's not like Microsoft is updating and patching it anymore, so it is what it is at this point.
yeah, to be honest, if I had to fire up a Windows XP machine, I would not connect that thing to the internet unless I absolutely had to. And then the minute I was done doing whatever I needed to do, I'd pull it right back off the internet. Because it's been out, everything that's wrong with it or every bug that's in it, they've had years and years and years to figure out how to hack. So, XP being that way. So here's the thing: Windows 10 is going to go that route. It will stop getting security patches around October of 2025, as Matt and I were saying, and at that point, it stops becoming a moving target for exploit hunters or hackers. All right, so now that's Windows 10. So there's probably about a little under 3 years left on Windows 10, right? We're in 22 now. We just passed the end of October 22. So you got just under 3 years for Windows 10. And then um, now the other thing is Windows 8 and 8.1. All right, those two operating systems are coming to end of life this January of 2023. At the end of January, there will be no more security patches or updates for Windows 8 and Windows 8.1. They're considered end of life. The only people that are going to get any updates for those at all are going to be big corporations that can pay Microsoft huge bucks to write custom patches for those. It's called like business maintenance, or it's real
Yeah.
expensive. So, at home, you're not going to want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. It'll break your bank. Big corporations can pull that, but to
Yeah.
us regular folks out here, all right. So when Windows 10 goes bye-bye, um, there's going to be millions of PCs that are not able to upgrade to Windows 11,
Right.
right?
Part of the reason for that is going to be that I believe one of the requirements for running Windows 11, and it's not even, it's actually one of the kind of the things that you have to have more modernized on your machines in order to run Windows 11 is for security. It's what's called Trusted Platform Module, or TPM. And is it 2.0 or
2.0, they
1.2.0?
want it.
Yeah,
Yeah, 1.2 won't
yeah,
cut it for
1.2
Windows
won't cut it.
11.
You need so your machine is going to have to be capable of running TPM 2.0, and a lot of computers, even my computer at home that I got just a couple of years ago, it's not capable of upgrading to Windows 11. I'm on Windows 10, and that's okay for now while it's still being updated, and it works perfectly fine. It's a pretty good computer, but I can't upgrade to Windows 11 unless I swap out a bunch of hardware, at which point I'm basically making myself a new computer anyway.
Yeah,
And so a lot of machines are going to run into this problem in the next few years.
yeah,
They'll be, it's not like they're 15-year-old computers. These are just a couple years old, if that, but they're not going to be able to make that update. So the question at that point becomes, well, if I cannot upgrade to Windows 11 because of my hardware, and you know, Windows 10 is going to be out of service, or Windows 8, or whatever it is that you're using it on it. Um, and I don't want to have to pay a lot of money to replace hardware, basically just get a new computer because this one still works just fine. Well, what are my options at that point?
all right. All right. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into a couple of the things that Matt was talking about. Number one, the TPM 2.0. A trusted platform module is a little chip that's all by itself on the motherboard, and it's used to store encryption keys. Okay. And so some older PCs will have TPM 1.2, and that won't be good enough for Windows 11. But it's a special chip on the motherboard that's actually soldered on there. So you can't just swap out your processor and be good to go if it's got the older TPM. Now,
You have to
on the
replace the
other,
motherboard entirely.
right, you have to replace the motherboard at the least, and at that point, your Windows license isn't going to be valid anymore, anyways, because you changed too much hardware, and Microsoft invalidates the license for Windows, and that's a whole nother headache in and of itself. But additionally, there are some processors that will not support Windows 11. All right, and here it is. I've got the laptop I'm running right now has an Intel Core i3 seventh generation Core i3 processor in there, and it won't support Windows 11, even though it's got TPM 2.0 chip on the motherboard, because you have to have at least an eighth generation core processor from Intel, and I'm not sure what the processor breakdown is for AMD, but there's a similar issue with AMD processors. If the processor is a little too far back, it's not going to work with
Yeah.
Windows 11. So it's not just the TPM, it's also the processors. Meanwhile, a Core i3 seventh generation processor is still a pretty good processor.
Yeah, or like I've got a little bit of a backwards situation where um, I believe on my machine it's actually the motherboard and the TPM module that is the issue. I believe it's a 1.2, whereas my processor is an i5 8th gen Intel processor. So the processor itself is it's pretty good. You know, it's a few generations back, but it still works pretty well, and it's not like
And it would
stuff.
support the
Yeah,
processor would support
the
Windows
processor would
11,
support it,
but
the
the TPM
motherboard
won't.
would not.
Right, exactly. So we're both kind of in the same boat too with the current PCs we have. So here's the scoop. There's this operating system out there which a lot of people have heard of and a few people probably haven't. It's called Linux, and it's been around for a long time. It's free and open source, and there's a lot of different flavors of Linux. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and show you how to download Ubuntu Linux. Ubuntu is spelled Ubuntu, and it's an African word that kind of equates to something similar to the golden rule that we're all used to. Be good to each other or be kind to each other or live life kindly or, basically don't do unto others as you would have done unto yours. Kind of along those lines. It's kind of like peace, love, and joy. Yeah,
Yeah,
kind of.
it's like togetherness.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
forget
The
the
exact
exact meaning of it,
translation to
but it
English, but
has that kind of meaning
you
to it.
get the idea. But the company that created Ubuntu Linux, it's their version of Linux. It's still free software. Right? That's the one thing about Linux. It's open source software and it is free. Okay? That's a key point. And Ubuntu Linux is made by a company called Canonical. It's spelled, like Canon, ICAL, Canonical, and they're a British company. They're in the UK. All right. And Canonical makes a desktop version of Ubuntu Linux, and that's free for anyone to download. And they also they make their money really on server and server maintenance because Linux is not big in PC desktops. It's really not. It's like what 3-5% of the
Yeah,
market share for PC
yeah.
desktops.
People have been talking about, is this the year of the Linux desktop forever,
20 years.
for like
Yeah,
10, 20 years? Yeah.
yeah.
So Linux has always been a very kind of uh, niche choice in the in your
For
desktop
PC
PC for
desktops.
PC desktop.
All
Yes.
right. Now you
But
get into web servers
web servers, lots of kind of servers, especially web servers.
like
But in the
80,
industry,
90%.
yeah, you're the large majority of servers um, running in most industries that aren't doing things like Active Directory or like like maintenance and all that.
Yeah.
And even some of that is Linux, but like web servers especially, they're going to be various what are called Dan called them flavors. The term that's frequently used is distros or distributions. So there are different other distros of Linux, but it's all Linux, and so they will all share a lot of similarities in how they function.
All right. So when you get talking about a distro, right?
Mm,
Basically, the kernel, the core of the operating system is the same from
yeah,
one to
that
the other.
and that's one of the things we might get in trouble if I don't mention this is Linux frequently in like kind of tech communities and stuff, especially ones that maybe don't take themselves so seriously or maybe take themselves a little too seriously. Um, Linux is often referred to as Linux is not the OS technically, but it's the kernel, but the kernel is just the core of the operating system, and everything else that's built on top of it is like the OS altogether.
Yeah.
That's a distinction that's not super important for this, but a distro is basically, yeah, it's built on top of that core Linux kernel.
Right. All right, so then the various teams out there that put together these distributions choose what desktop presentation software they put in there, what drivers they include with it that tell it how to talk to various year, make, and model bits of hardware. Like, okay, we have this Wi-Fi adapter from 2018. It's like a Realtek model, whatever from 2018. There's a software driver that tells the Linux kernel how do I talk to that specific make, model, and year of hardware, or specific make, model, and year of keyboard, or specific make, model, and year of camera. Right? That's all a software driver is. It's just a little interpreter program. Okay, and then they decide what of that to include, and then what other software might they include with it? Well, they're going to include the Firefox browser. Will they include the Chromium browser? That's a Linux type one. It's not Google Chrome. It's very similar. It's modeled on Google Chrome, but it's not. Okay, and then also a lot of them will come with LibreOffice, which is a free Office suite. A lot of people that are leaving Windows are afraid, what am I to do with my Office? LibreOffice will do the job just fine for what you do at home. It will. It'll
Yeah.
totally do it. And it's not a monthly subscription. It's free. Yeah, and it'll open the Microsoft files too. All right. So um, the reason that we're kind of going with Ubuntu is because it's very common. It's the most common, I believe at this point in time, it's the most commonly used distribution of Linux for PC desktop.
Yes, and
You're right.
it's a very user-friendly PC desktop distro of Linux. It's very friendly, especially to people who have not used Linux before. There are some out there, that are like, you have to compile the OS yourself as part of the installation, and that's just,
Let's not even
yeah,
scare people with that
don't worry
Halloween.
about all that. Ubuntu is simple. It's as simple as any Linux distro you will find. Installation, it's basically as simple as installing Windows in a lot of ways. Um, and so that's why we're using Ubuntu, because there's a lot of support for it and it's very user friendly.
Right. That's a key point. There's a lot of support and there's like online forums and stuff where you can get a lot of information. And Canonical is a pretty well respected
Yeah.
company in this particular space. So that's what we're going to go with. Is we're going to go with Ubuntu Linux, and we are going to show you in this episode how to download it, how to make the installer USB, and then we're going to switch over to a different camera at that point, and we're going to show you how to actually install it on a PC. And that's what we're going to cover. How do I get Ubuntu? How do I get it ready to install? And how do I install it on a PC? And then the videos that we'll do after, we're going to cover like how to do things in Ubuntu. How do how do I open the Office software? How do I use the browser? How do I move the
Yeah.
taskbar around? How do I change the
Yeah.
wallpaper? How do I change the settings? And believe it or not, you don't have to do very much in command line with Ubuntu Linux and a lot of other modern Linux distributions. And there's tons of free software available for you. That's one of the things we'll probably show in the next video is how do I find other software to use on Ubuntu? But not this video. For this particular episode, we're going to focus on how to download it, how to find it, how to download it, how to install it, and and go from there. And once we get Ubuntu running on a machine, that'll be the end of this episode, and then we'll get into future episodes on how to use it. And we're trying to keep this friendly for regular users. We're not trying to make this for technicians. We're trying to make this for the people whose PCs are going to get left by Windows so that they have an alternative.
Yeah, so even if you decided you wanted to get a new PC, you don't have to get rid of your old one. You can still use it, and it can still be a perfectly serviceable rather computer. Or if you can't afford to get a new one, then you have options for what you can do with your current hardware.
All right. Now, before we go in installing Ubuntu, all right, I would like to make one critical point here before we go hunting down Ubuntu and installing it on a PC, right? you're probably on that Windows PC going to have a whole bunch of files that you're going to not want to get rid of. And the way we're going to go about installing Ubuntu today will wipe out everything that's sitting on the storage drive in that PC. It's going to go poof, bye bye. All right. So go to like Costco or one of those places and get yourself a nice little USB 1 or 2 terabyte. This is a 2 terabyte hard drive. I bought it at Costco like 3 or 4 years ago for $100. Right? It's probably $40 now to get a 2 terabyte, and you probably get a 6 terabyte for $100 now. I wouldn't be surprised. But go get a portable hard drive like this and copy all your files over onto this before you get out of Windows, before you switch over from Windows. Very, very important. Get that portable hard drive, hook it up, and copy all your files over to it that you want to save. Forget about programs. You're going to be using different programs that do pretty much the same thing in Linux. Just get the files off of it. Your music files, your photo files, your documents, don't worry about downloaded installer programs because they won't work in Linux. Just get your docs, your music, your pictures, your
Yeah,
videos.
you don't want to go through the whole process and be, maybe you're getting a little bit excited about like, yeah, hey, let's try this new thing. Let's see how Linux goes. And then you get there and you're expecting all your stuff to be there. When you're installing a new operating system like this, it's like you said, it all goes poof. It's gone. It's like a clean wipe of the computer. Uh, so, like you said, make sure you back up what you need to back up. Now, if you don't have anything on your computer to back up, cool. But my guess is you probably do, in which case you don't want to lose it.
Oh, a little side note, I saw an article yesterday came out that Google Drive is going to start giving users that are using the free accounts 1 terabyte instead of 15 gigs pretty soon.
Oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
so that's going to be an
Yeah,
upgrade that'll be rolled out. But right now,
yeah,
get that portable hard drive.
yeah. Or if you already have a subscription to like a large volume like cloud backup thing, you could use that. Portable hard drive is also relatively cheap. It lasts a while and it's pretty reliable. Whatever method you use, just make sure you back up what you need to back up before you go through and
Yep.
do all this.
Yeah, save your files. Save your files to something other than that machine, right? Because you're going to wipe it out when you install Linux on it. All right, so on that note, I'm going to switch us over to share the desktop. You're going to get a little bit of an infinity screen here, and then we'll switch over, and we're going to hunt down Ubuntu Linux. So I'll just do a quick Google search for Ubuntu Linux. And pray this is not the moment that the internet decided to cut on me. All right, so here we go. Ubuntu Enterprise Open Source and Linux. Okay, and here we go. Download Ubuntu Desktop. Now, I want you to notice what's happening down here in the bottom corner of this screen. This is a little tip for you on internet safety here. When I hover over this, if you see the address where I'm actually going to go is ubuntu.com. All right, so create a bootable CD, or I go to any of these other links, might go somewhere else. So pay attention to what it's saying down in that bottom left corner of the screen. But that's actually right where I want to go. I want to go to ubuntu.com/download. Right? Yeah, we're going to accept the trackers or the cookies or whatever. All right, so Ubuntu Desktop. All right, that's what we're going to do is Ubuntu Desktop, right? Because the desktop is the same thing as a PC. Notice they have all this server and cloud and Internet of Things. No, 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 no. Ubuntu Desktop is where we're going right now. All right, so download Ubuntu Desktop. Now, what we want is Ubuntu 22.04. Well, 22.04.1, I guess they're up to a little bit higher revision, but that 22.04 LTS is important when you're talking about Ubuntu. All right. 22 is the year and 04 is the month. So this is basically April of 2022. that they're talking about here. And that LTS stands for long-term stable release. All right. This is the one, if you're going to be in a small business or something, you want to see that LTS on the end of there. And they only put out a new LTS version in even numbered years every couple of
Yeah,
years, right?
I believe the version of Ubuntu, the last LTS one that they released was like an 18. So the
No,
8
no,
was
there
it?
was
Was there a 20
18,
one?
18.04 and then 20.04 and
Mm,
then 22. So it's every couple
yeah,
of years on
yes.
even numbered years. Usually around April, they put out a new long-term stable release. Now, this PC that we're installing Linux on already has Linux on it, but it's Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. And here's a little clue for you. Since I don't have any files saved on this thing, we're just going to wipe it and go straight to 22.04 like a brand new install, just like you're going to be doing with your Windows PC. All right. Because if I try to upgrade from 18.04 LTS to 22.04 LTS, we'd be looking about anywhere from 7 to 10 hours of watching all kinds of stuff scroll by in the command prompt. It's a lot more work. So we're not going to subject you to all that. We're just going to do it the simple way and put a fresh copy of 22.04 LTS on here. All right, so I'm going to go to the Ubuntu desktop homepage, and here we go. Download Ubuntu.
Take us back here.
It is.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
here we
yeah,
go.
the
There's the
download on the
download.
right.
All right. So what I want to download is the the ISO, and it's already downloading. All right. So it's downloading the 22.04 LTS ISO, and it's trying to tell me there's 5 hours left to download this thing. Yeah, no, we're not going to do that, are we?
I'm thinking no. I'm thinking what is that? 3.8, 3.6 gigabytes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might take a minute to download. All right, so just be aware that when you go to download this ISO file, it is going to take a while. I'm gonna,
Especially if your connection's a little bit spotty, like
okay, so I've already created a USB. So we're gonna let that go, but you would have to actually create the USB in order to do this. So I'm going to try to walk you through that process of creating the USB. I'll let that download just keep running in the background. We're not going to worry about that. Let's see if I have that ISO for Linux anywhere on here. Give me a minute. I'm going to get in the downloads folder and see if I have a Linux ISO already here.
doesn't look like it.
I've got a 20.04 ISO here. So we can show you the process basically, and then we'll turn around and actually, oh wait, no, 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 no. I don't want to
There's
open the
escape.
ISO, but there it is. All right, so we've got a 20.04. That's the previous version. And I'm just going to show you how you would go about making the installer.
Yeah, the process will be the same with the 22.04 ISO file as it is with this. The
Right.
process is the same. It's just the installation that would be on the USB
Yeah, it'll
drive
be
is
the
going to be a little different.
previous version that we're going to make a USB with, but I have a USB with the current version, and when we actually install Linux, we'll use that. But you're going to need to make a USB installer disk from this ISO file. Okay, so what we're going to do is once the ISO file downloads, we're going to need to create the bootable USB. So what I'm going to do is Google search.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. So the first thing that's going to come up is this one for Linux Mint. That's a different distribution, right? This is linuxmint.com.
That's Linux Hint, but
Oh, Linux Hint,
yeah,
is
but
it?
Linux Mint is a separate distro of Linux.
Oops. All
Yeah.
right. So, and it talks about using Etcher, and then here's this create a bootable USB stick with Rufus on Ubuntu, and this one is geared straight towards Ubuntu. So that's the one that we're going to use. Do me a favor, Matt, and pull that 128 gig USB stick out right there,
Oh, this one
the
right here.
bottom one. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't want another USB stick stuck in anywhere so that we accidentally wipe that when we install create this installer, right? So I've got the create a bootable USB stick with Rufus on Windows. Here's a tutorial. Yeah, Ubuntu's saying use the etcher. Interesting. Well, all right, we'll take them at their word. We'll use the Balena etcher. Okay. And there we go. Download for Windows. That's going to take about 3 or 4 minutes. So that's a little better than the ISO for
Do we
22.04.
want to just come back once that finishes downloading?
Yeah, it won't take that long. All right, so while we're waiting on this, an ISO, a .iso file like that, that's basically what you would use on a CD, that like a CD or DVD image. And we're going to use this at Balena Etcher program to convert that to a bootable USB drive. And because you can't directly use that ISO file just as is on the USB and boot
Yeah.
up to it.
And while this is downloading, just to explain very briefly what we're talking about here, what's going on. So normally when you turn on your computer, right, it's booting up your operating system, Windows, Linux, Mac OS, whatever it might be. It's booting that up from the operating system that is installed on your hard drive. And then, you're in a computer, you can put a USB drive into, a USB port on your computer, and you can use that to access files, store things, whatever the case may be. Um, but what you can actually also do here is you can, and this is what we're doing, is you can take a USB drive and you can make it essentially have like a copy of the OS on it that you can, and then you can tell the computer, hey, instead of booting and finding your operating system on the hard drive, I want you to look at the USB drive and boot the OS from there. And when it does that, it's going to find the installation files for the operating system that you want to install, in this case, Ubuntu, and it is going to say, hey, okay, let's go ahead and start the installation process by getting everything running from the USB instead of, booting from the hard drive itself. So that's just briefly, if you weren't sure, that's what we're doing here, is we're configuring a USB drive, a little thumb drive uh, to function as an installer. And like you said, ISO files, .iso files, they're like what you would find on a CD. So, frequently, especially, in years gone by, you would install operating systems from a CD. We're doing a very similar thing here. We're just creating a USB drive, and we're creating an installer on a USB drive and having it act like an old installation CD would.
All right, so I'm going to switch over to the downloads folder. We've got the Balena Etcher set up, all right, here. And like anything that I download from the internet, right? I'm going to want to make sure that the place I'm downloading it from is not having a bad day. So I'm going to right click on the ISO file that I'm going to use, right? Because that's going to install my operating system. I don't want any viruses in there. So I'm going to scan selected item for viruses. Now, a lot of PCs, you'll have different types of antivirus, but if I can right click on that thing and find where it says scan for viruses with whatever kind of antivirus software you have, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to have it check that real quick. And it's going to run a quick antivirus scan on the thing just to make sure that the operating system I'm going to install is not infected with any viruses. I want to be 100% sure on that because that's going to be the core of running the PC once we switch over to it. All right, so we're going to let that thing scan, and then I'm also going to scan the Balena Etcher setup file as well once it's done. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cancel this scan because I know that I scanned that ISO file quite a long time ago. I downloaded that in 2021, and I scan anything that I download this way. So I'm not going to spend time on that. We'll do it, it'll be a little quicker by right clicking on the Balena Etcher and scanning that for a virus because I just downloaded. Look, it's a smaller file. It took a lot less time, right? But that ISO file is big. As you saw, it was like this one's not quite 3 GB, and the new one for 22.04 is a little over 3 GB. All right, so it's a big file and it's going to take a while to scan for viruses and it's going to take a while to download. That's just kind of part of the fun, all right? But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install the Balena Etcher now that I've checked it for viruses. And yes, we agree to the terms because you kind of have to.
Yeah, you can decline, but then you can't
Then you
use the
can't use it.
software.
Okay, so what we're going to do is insert the USB stick that I'm going to use to make the new thing. Um,
You're gonna be flashing from a file, I believe.
yep, flash from file,
So you're gonna pick flash from file, and then you're gonna navigate to
downloads,
downloads, or wherever you're keeping that ISO file. It's probably gonna be in downloads if you just downloaded it. And then,
and there's the Ubuntu 22.04.1 desktop ISO file right here.
do you want to use the sorry, do you want to use the .2, like the more recent one?
Yeah,
Yeah, either way. Yeah.
yeah, because we're really doing this more as an example, but yeah, Matt's exactly right on that. So I'm not using my computer glasses at the moment, so Matt's kind of keeping up for me. You know, part of the fun of being 30 years older. All right, so we're going to go ahead and click open on that. And then we're going to select the target. This is where we're going to tell it what drive to use. And we're going to use that 8 GB drive. I think it has to be a minimum of a 4 GB drive, but 8 GB drive is going to be better. All right.
Yeah, your most thumb drives you're gonna buy these days are going to
Be
be,
32 or
yeah,
64.
getting a 32 gigabyte thumb drive or 64 is also pretty cheap. Like you shouldn't have too much of an issue. It's just if you have an older thumb drive that you're wanting to use, make sure it's large enough
Right.
to work.
Because anything on the thumb drive is going to get wiped.
Yeah, that's another thing to remember is that when you are creating a bootable USB drive, you kind of like when you're installing a new OS, in order to do this, the anything that is on that USB drive is going to be wiped in order to create the installation media. So make sure that whatever you got on there has been transferred elsewhere before you do this as well, because you don't want all or all the photos or files or whatever's on that thumb drive to disappear because you're trying to install Linux.
And there it goes. As soon as I clicked on flash, now it's quote unquote flashing the drive, and it's making the bootable USB. And actually what was on that thumb drive was 18.04 LTS. So
Yeah, we're just upgrading a little bit.
yeah, there we go. All right. So once this is done, the USB drive will be ready to use as an installer. So I'm going to wait through the process. It's saying it's going to be about 4 minutes and 30 seconds or so to finish making this drive. So we're going to let it finish because I want you to see what it's going to be like at the end of the process too. I want you to see every screen that you're going to run into on here. So I'm going to kind of take my time with it. And if you notice here, it's this My Linux Live D drive on the left. When I popped it in, this would have just popped in the list over here on the left-hand side. These are both the same thing, all right? And that's the drive that it's making. All right, yeah, it's verifying that the drive install took. All right, so there we go. Flash complete. Ubuntu 24.20.04. All right, we're not going to use that one, but I wanted you to see the process of how to make it. That's it. The USB drive is done and ready. So I'm just going to close all this stuff out, and then it looks like it already took it out of the list as well. So I'm going to look down here. Yeah, it's not. It already ejected the or detached the USB from the operating system so that we can pull it out of the drive. And that disk is now ready to go with 20.04, which we're going to use the 22.04 disk. All right, so at that point, we're kind of done here with this. And we'll go ahead and switch back over to OBS for a minute and get back on the camera. And we're going to switch gears now and go ahead and start the recording part with the phone, right? And start actually installing Linux on the other machine. So at this point, I'm going to stop recording this part of the episode and we'll switch over to the other one. And then we'll come back on here for the very end. All right. Hey, Matt. All right, we're going to stick the USB drive in a USB port.
All right, so got to open one on the front here.
Any
one will do. Just got to open one here.
Yeah, any USB port will work.
So from here, you're going to need to kind of act quickly once the computer starts booting up. See, what's going to happen is by default, your computer is most likely going to be set to just boot from the hard drive and boot into Windows normally. We need to configure it to not do that and instead to go from the USB drive. So that involves going into the computer's BIOS. So I'll show you what that is. So let's go ahead and get this turned on.
All right, should be booting up. And delete or F12.
So in this case, it's delete. So it's while that first screen is popping up, you'll want to hit, it'll probably be delete quickly. Now, your BIOS or UEFI, whatever the case may be, they're all going to look a little bit different. Some of the kind of older ones are going to look more like this. Some of the newer ones are going to look real fancy, and you'll be able to do stuff with the mouse. But in this case, we got a little bit older looking one. That's fine. We're going to be using just the keyboard, and we're going to be configuring it to boot from the USB drive.
And watch along that top edge. You see how there's like a little gray tab sticking up there that says main at the upper left corner of the screen? Okay, we're going to have to use the arrow keys on the keyboard, right? The arrow keys on the keyboard. And we're going to switch over from main in this case to the boot menu. Now yours might be a little different. You might have to find the boot options somewhere else, but here we go in the boot options. And first boot device.
All right, so first boot device
is a removable device at the moment.
Interesting.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll just move the Ubuntu up to. We'll move this up to.
I think Ubuntu is the operating system on.
Ubuntu is already installed on
this. The older version, 18.04 is on there.
Gotcha.
Right? The removable device is probably the one we want to boot from.
Okay. Well, it looks like it's actually already configured to boot from.
Right. We want that first boot device to be what the removable device or your USB stick,
But
whatever
just
it says.
just to show you what this might end up looking like, you might come in and it will look something like this, where it'll be configured to boot from your OS. It might be Ubuntu, it might be Windows, it might be whatever it may be. And you'll need to change it. So in this case, what we want to do is just press enter and select a removable device, and it will switch those and make the removable device the first in the boot priority order. So when the computer turns on, it has these options set, and it's going to go through and say like, hey, I'm going to look for a USB I can boot from. If it's not there, then it'll go to the second thing. But because we do have the removable device, it will boot from your installer and not the installed OS, which is what we want.
Okay, and then we're going to go to that lower left corner, F10, save and exit setup.
So press F10, save configuration and exit, yes. Okay. So, that was actually peppermint.
And actually, it went to the hard drive here.
Oh, did it go to the hard drive?
Yeah, it did. Go ahead and do a Control-Alt-Delete on the keyboard. And then when it comes back around, you might need to go into the F12. F12.
Oh, the boot menu. I hit delete again.
That's all right. Just hit escape to exit out of this.
Yeah.
And then get ready to hit F12.
Let's see, Control-Alt-Delete.
Yeah, and we're
See,
going to
we have to go to the boot menu here, which is what we're doing.
Now, I'm going to see you at the lower left corner, and we want that F12 to display the boot menu.
Okay.
All right.
So now we have the UEFI, the Lexar USB.
In black there. Yeah. We're going to boot to that.
All right.
All right, and now we have the option to try or install Ubuntu. Boot from this image on this device. We're going to go right away with the top option.
Yeah, we're installing Ubuntu, so we're just going to do that.
Don't worry, you might see some errors like that pop up, but that's okay. We're not going to worry about it.
Yeah, sometimes there are little errors like that aren't actually like significant or important to anything that we're doing. It's just some little goof at the lower levels of the OS that it's noting.
All right, so now we've got Ubuntu starting to come up, the installer here. And Ubuntu loves to, Canonical, they love to name their Ubuntu desktop systems kind of interesting animal names. And this one happens to be Jammy Jellyfish. They're very British that way, but we love them for it. All right, so here we're getting a little action now. All right, so what do we want to do here? We want to try Ubuntu or install Ubuntu. And we're going to install it, make sure, go ahead and select.
Yeah, so you can try it where it'll just kind of make a little mini boot thing and it'll come off the USB. Or you can try it out without affecting your computer. But in this case, we're going to just be installing Ubuntu directly onto the machine.
Right, so, and we're going to leave it defaulted to English.
Yeah. If you use a different language, obviously use whatever you feel most comfortable using. We're just going to leave it as English because that's us. All right, US English, continue.
Yeah, you could test the keyboard there, but I'm sure we'll be fine. We're going to go ahead and pick up a network to connect to, and do the Sarin.
All right.
Okay,
so
and then
click whatever your
click
Wi-Fi
connect,
is.
and then I'm going to hand over the phone here. You want to keep it on the screen?
Yep.
All right, and we should be connected.
There we go. And we will continue on to your past there. That's obviously just connecting to your wireless network, on install.
Hopefully I didn't fat finger the keyboard or the password. No, looks like we're good.
Yeah, looks like we're good.
All right, so we will do a normal installation that will come with a full kind of suite of software that is included with the Ubuntu installation. If you want to, you can do this minimal installation here, which, like it says, is just the web browser and basic utilities. But the normal install will also have Office software, some games, media players, things like that. Your other options here: download updates while installing Ubuntu. So this does help you save some time. There are cases where you might not do this, but that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, we're going to do it for today.
And then install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware and additional media formats.
Yep.
We're going to go ahead and do that as well. And then continue.
All right.
And as with many things tech, it just takes time to do.
Yep. Hurry up and wait. That's par for the course. Hurry up and wait a little bit.
Yep. So last part here, your installation type. You can kind of create and resize partitions and create multiple partitions if you're doing something real particular. But the basic thing, and what you'll most likely be doing if you're replacing your OS, you're just going to erase the disk and install Ubuntu. And it will warn you here, this is going to delete everything that's on there.
Remember we talked about that USB hard drive so you could save all your files. This is why right here, because it's going to erase the disk and wipe it out and put Ubuntu over there on top of it, and there will be no more files. So make sure you have backed up your files before you get here. If you haven't, this is the time to cancel and go back and back up your files.
You restart the computer, you go back up your files, then you do this again.
Yeah, hit quit right there if you haven't backed up your files and go back them up. Otherwise, feel free to hit install now.
One last bit here, there are some advanced features. Don't worry about these too much. These are just, they're advanced things. They're real kind of particular. For a regular install, you don't need to worry about these. Just make sure you got all your stuff backed up, and then we're going to hit install now. It's kind of a common feature. It's a very user-friendly thing, especially with Linux. There are distros that are very user-friendly. The install options and everything are pretty straightforward, especially if you're doing a standard install. But there are a lot of extra kind of things that you can do if you're being real particular about how you want your machine set up.
Yeah, that's more for IT techs.
Yeah, that's more if you're doing this. If you're trying to do really particular things.
If you're trying to save an old PC at home, just pretty much default. Just remember to add that third-party software at the bottom of that check mark, because otherwise you may have trouble with like your Wi-Fi card or something like that. You'll have a lot less issues if you go ahead and just check that off and let it install it.
Yeah, because if you don't do that, then there's a chance you may get in there, and even though you're connected to the network ostensibly, the drivers for your Wi-Fi card might not be included, and so it's not going to work properly, and then it's kind of a pain to have to go and...
Hey, Matt, go ahead and pop the mouse cursor over on top of that gray part for a second. See how that mouse cursor is like doing that little spinning thing there? That's one way you can tell it's still chewing on stuff. It's kind of like the little circle spinning around in Windows. Just a little quick FYI. All right.
So this is one more kind of warning telling you, hey, with whatever changes you have configured here, they're going to be written to the disk. Anything that's on there, any partitions you have, any data, any files, whatever may be on there is going to be overwritten when you are doing this. It's making sure that you're good with what you've got here and what you're going to be doing.
Last chance if you haven't backed up those files, because after this, goodbye.
Yep. So they give you enough warnings, and we've given you enough warnings that if that happens, you can't say that we didn't warn you.
And Ubuntu didn't too.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
so we're gonna go ahead and hit continue because we're good to go on this.
And there we have the little black circle of waiting. Yeah, that's not that different from Windows either, is it? In some ways.
No, Mac OS has a little spinning beach ball. Windows has the blue
Now
circle.
they want to know where we are. Yeah, we're in California. Los Angeles is close enough.
Yeah, just your time zone,
Yeah,
basically. Whatever
yeah.
time zone you're in.
What time zone are you in? Yes, exactly. All right, and now we're going to put a username. Let's just make it user 1.
Yeah. So, name for your name. Say our name is I don't know, Beeping Edge.
Hey, I like that.
Yeah. So the computer name you can change, like the actual name of the system. So when it pops up, if you had to network it with something else, like what is it going to appear as? You can change this to whatever the case may be. We'll just leave this as is. You can change it later. We're just gonna leave it like this. Username, Beeping Edge, work for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. And then for your password, just put in a password.
Got ya.
Let's see. Require my password to log in automatically.
Yeah.
I would say require your password just in case,
Especially if you're on a laptop that you're going to take out and about
Yeah,
anywhere.
if it's a laptop or if it's something that someone else may be using, generally speaking, it's a good idea to require a password regardless.
Yeah, the Active Directory thing, that's stuff for basically a corporate environment or an office environment. If you're doing this at home, forget it.
If you need it to be, basically, if you need Active Directory, you'll know that you need Active Directory.
And your IT team at work will probably be setting it up for you, most likely.
Yeah. In this case, we don't need that, so we're going to continue on.
All right, now here's where we let it copy files. And at this point, it's going to be copying files. And you're going to get all these fun little screens that say, oh, welcome to Ubuntu, fast and full of new features, all that kind of stuff. And they will go through and tell you a little bit of all the stuff that you can get on there and that kind of stuff. We're going to let a little bit of that scroll, and then while we wait for that orange line to cross, we might just go ahead and pause the video here and bring it back up once that orange line is all the way across the bottom. I think there might be one more screen or two, and we'll let those go. But
yeah, feel free to pause here if you want to take a closer look at them. I'm just going to make sure we get through these. You can see you've got some included.
It'll go back
open
to the
source
beginning.
office stuff. All sorts of customization options. You can do a lot of really cool. It's a little more advanced, but you can do a lot of really cool customization of your operating system with Linux, even more than you can do with a lot of Windows machines. You can do a lot of really cool stuff with Linux.
All right, and I think we're pretty much through all the splash screens there.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause recording here, and we'll come back once that little orange line is all the way across the bottom. Okay, we're at the point here where it's saying installation is complete and restart now. So we're going to go ahead and reboot this thing. And it should reboot off the hard drive all by its lonesome. All right, we're not going to worry about all that error stuff. We'll just let it go.
Yeah, that's normal. I wouldn't worry about that.
No, I wouldn't worry about that at all. We're just going to let it go.
Okay, so please remove the installation medium, then press enter.
Yep, it's saying remove the USB drive, basically installation medium, and then press enter on your keyboard. All right, so Matt just pulled out the thumb drive and hit enter. All right, we're just going to leave it alone while that happens now. We're just going to let it do its thing and boot up. There it goes. It's coming up. This might take a minute. This PC is not fast. But once it gets up here a little bit and it's had a little chance to catch up with itself, we'll show you a little bit what Ubuntu looks like trying to use it on a low-end machine like this. Yeah, just a little bit, enough that you can see that it's not horribly slow. A machine with more RAM would be much faster, of course.
Yeah.
It would boot faster and everything, but it's not too bad. And I don't think I'm going to clip this part either, because I want you to see what it's like to boot this thing up on a low-end machine like this. There we go. All right, so now we'll just click on the name, the username there, type in the password.
Fat fingered it a couple times, and then... Yeah.
That's right. If you don't type the correct password, try again. And there we are, we're in Ubuntu. All right. And it's talking about connecting to online accounts. We're not going to worry about that. Now, interestingly enough, Ubuntu defaults to having the taskbar on the left side of the screen. And I know that drove me nuts as a Windows user. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip that connect to the online account thing. Click skip there.
Let's see. We don't sign anything right now.
Yeah, we're going to skip that.
Privacy, you don't need location services. Ready to go. This is the software, a lot of the software that comes with.
That's software.
Or software rather that you can install.
Yeah, that's stuff that you can install. There's a whole lot of things that you can install. There's tons and tons and tons of software that you can get for Ubuntu. They have their own software library that you can get. There's a lot, and there's stuff you can add that's outside the library too. There's a lot of it.
So we'll click done.
We'll click done, and then let's get in the Ubuntu settings, which are up in the upper right corner there. So click where the little Wi-Fi icon is up there, Matt. Go into settings. All right, so Matt just opened the settings, and we're going to go over to appearance on the left, and we're going to go where is it?
I believe that's the dock here. So the position of the screen.
Position on the screen, let's put it to the bottom.
Yeah, you can put it on the right if you want to. You can leave it on the left, which is the default for this kind of thing, or you can bring it down here.
And now your taskbar is on the bottom, just like would be in Windows.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Software
there's updates available, and we'll go ahead and there's a lot of updates because we just freshly installed it, even the ones that it was able to get. We'll let it go ahead and install those in the background, and just leave them running. All right, but we'll go ahead and close out the settings. And then leave that running up there at the top. And let's just go open the Firefox browser down at the bottom. All right, Firefox. It takes a second.
It's loading. It's an old machine. It's a little slow.
Yep. Yeah, it's also running updates in the background too.
Yeah, I don't think any of the security updates were for Firefox. It was mostly the LibreOffice stuff.
Yeah, probably in a few for Ubuntu as well. All right, and you can see at the upper left corner here, it is working on loading the Firefox web browser, but it's also chewing on updates in the background, so it's going to take a minute, and it's only barely been booted up too. Keep that in mind. Like any other computer, it takes a.
I clicked it twice, so it's already running. It says.
Okay. Yeah, you don't want to click things twice.
Yeah.
On the and just like the Windows taskbar, you don't want to click twice there. And there we go. We got Firefox up, and that might be why it took so long. You know, because usually it's fairly quick, and. Of course, we're at the default welcome page to the Firefox for the first time you use it. And at that point, you can go to anywhere you want, like maybe beepingedge.com. Yeah. Let's go to beepingedge.com. And what are we going to get here? Did I say this is an old slow machine? I did.
Probably should have just left the updates for later, but yeah, that's okay.
That's all right. It's getting ready to load. And there we are, Beeping Edge Tech Reviews. That's me and Matt. Okay, and then we've got the installation stuff going, and maybe let's open LibreOffice Writer, which is on the taskbar. That's right there. That guy. Yep. And there we go, tip of the day, and I just click OK. And there we go. We're already are ready to start typing up a document, etc., etc., etc. And LibreOffice doesn't just come with Writer. It has what's known as Calc, which is like the equivalent of Excel. It has an equivalent to PowerPoint. It has an equivalent to Access. It's a full-blown Office suite, and it's for free, which is really cool. And Matt's right. Please like and subscribe. Thank you. Yeah. To remind me to ask everyone to do that. You know, I kind of forget that. I get into the actual fun part, the technology and the recording and all that kind of stuff, and I forget to ask people to like and subscribe to our channel. But please do that. We appreciate subscribers. You know, us YouTubers.
Yeah,
and
it all. Yeah, we don't need to save that.
Nah, we're not going to save anything. We'll just don't save. But as you can see, it's not too bad for a 4 gig machine with a low end processor. And here we go. We've got the latest and greatest modern version of Ubuntu Linux 22.04 coming up on there. One thing that's kind of important to do, Matt, when we first fire up Ubuntu is bring up a terminal session and turn on the firewall. So we should probably do that. So hit Control T on the keyboard, I think. Is it Alt T, Control T?
No, Control T is a new tab on here.
Okay, there's another way to go about it. Close Firefox. And activities, and then up there where it says type here to search. So you clicked on activities there, and then he's going to go type here to search and just type in terminal and give it a minute. And click on terminal. All right, and we're going to type in superuserdo or sudo, S-U-D-O, space, UFW, space, enable. And then put in the password. That is superuserdo turn on our Ubuntu firewall enable. And it's enabled, and now you can just type exit and get out of there. All right, and the firewall is now on. Ubuntu is up and running and installed. It wasn't that horrible. And you've got Office software and Firefox all ready to go there already. It's going to need some updates when you first bring it up, of course, and it will ask you for updates, but it will tell you there are updates available. Do you want to install them now? It's not going to make you do it. It will let you do it when you're ready to do it. Okay, and that's a nice thing. All right, so that's enough on our first video installing Ubuntu.
Okay, and then we'll get into really using Ubuntu and some of the other stuff that you'll want to do.
Some of the specifics, but just as is right now, if all you were doing, it was just basic browsing the internet, maybe sending some emails, something like that. If you need to type up a real simple Word document, like the real basic stuff, your computer is ready to go just as is right now doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do anything else. It will work just fine right now.
Yep, and we'll walk you through doing some of that exact stuff in future episodes. But for right now, that's pretty much a wrap for this episode, and we'll say hi, Matt. Hi, Dan. And remember, together we're better. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. And like and subscribe, please. And you can find us at beepingedge.com.